You don't understand the power of God at work in you. You don't understand the assignment that you've been given. You don't understand that salvation, that you are set apart, that you are made for a difference, that you are the head, but you are not the tail. When you don't understand those things, people become problems. You see people as a problem instead of realizing people are the prize. See, this is the problem with the Western church. The Western church has got so insecure and afraid of the Spirit of God and so turned down in what we want that when people show up with problems, we start to pray that they'll go away. Dear Lord, I pray that you would help crazy Sally to go away because I cannot hear about her life one more time. Like, Lord, if you would just let us go back to when it was our nice little bruncheon and we just had our people and we did our things, and if you can bring back my music and my song and my carpet and like all these things, all of a sudden we start getting ready for a country club instead of being Christians that are convicted with a calling. To be honest, I don't want to be the same person a week from now. I always want to be growing in what God has for me. I want to be maturing. I want to be developing. I want to be going on the journey. Dare I say, I want to keep going on the miracle. Because the reality is every moment of your life is a miracle, whether you believe it or not. If you don't believe it, like I said last week, take a breath and you'll realize very quickly the breath you just breathed in was nothing that you own, nothing that you created, nothing that you deserve, but it's just a grace that's been given to you. So if you're ever wondering if there's grace for your life, breathe in. If you don't feel oxygen go in, well, that's it. No, I'm kidding. Why? Because there's grace for you. And not only is there grace for you, but because it's God's breath that's in our breath, it's the inspired breath, meaning that the breath he has given you is actually inspired breath for you to do inspired things for him. Think about that for a second. I would, Pastor, if you would slow down and say it quicker. Sorry, we're in a rented space, but not for long. Think about it. Every breath that you have is inspired by God, for God, to do God's work. Could it be maybe your frustration in life is not that he's not giving you enough breath, but you're using the breath for the wrong things? Well, I would never, all right, maybe you don't, but I definitely know I do. I definitely know there's some things in my life God probably is not glad he gave me that breath. No, he understands. I'm his son. He loves me. He knows, hey, you're sometimes a goober. Let's not do that. But I look back on my life and in seasons and I go, man, that was a waste of a breath. But what I love is in the journey of maturity, you get to discover the value of a breath, the value of a moment, but also you get to understand the reality of your preferences. Because I don't know if you know this, but your preferences can kill you. They can kill you. They can kill your family. They can kill your relationships. They can kill your calling. They can kill your life. Preferences kill. So as we journey into this conversation today, I invite you to take notes because I believe note takers are world changers because they remember what they're talking about. But I want you to title this talk, Your Preference May Kill You. Isn't that encouraging today? Some of you are going to go out to eat after service. They're going to be like, what would you like to eat? And you're like, I'd like to think a little bit longer because my preference may kill me. Now, I'm not just talking about, hey, are you going to get the fish? Are you going to get the steak? Are you going to get veggies, fries? But I'm talking about the preference of your physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial life. There's a lot of things we prefer in an individual reality. Like I know when it comes to me, I love certain things. I love certain things, certain ways, at certain times, doing what I want to do. I like that in my personal life. I like that in my marriage. I like that with my children. I like that with my job. I like that with my church. I like that with my friends. I like my preferences. But what I've came to realize in a very short time of existing on this world is you don't always get your way. You don't always get your preference. And to be honest, you could live in a life where you just get your preference, but I've realized that when I live just wanting my preference in life, my world, instead of getting bigger and bigger, it gets smaller and smaller. I begin to do things my way or the highway, and I notice, wait a second, everyone took the highway. I thought they were coming with me. I thought my ideas were good. Like, they were great. I agreed with them. Duh. But then I realized, wait a second, there are ways that are actually higher than my ways. They're truer than my ways. They're purer than my ways. They're longer. They're stronger. They see more. Oh, Lord, maybe my preference actually is killing me. So here's a few things I just want to give us as reference points before we dive into the message today. If you got your Bible with you, you can go to the book of 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 1 through 3 is where we'll start, and then we'll exegetically walk through as we're talking about Naaman in the Bible. But I just got three little points I just want to bring out, because the reality is your preference in life may actually keep you from God's purpose in your life. Your preference today, how it stands, how you want it, could potentially keep you from what God has for you. Another point that I have, it's a little cheesy. You could put it on a Christian bumper sticker. I just like how it sounds. But your way may stop the work of Yahweh. That's pretty good, huh? Made that myself, all right? Your way may stop the work of Yahweh. That's not true, Pastor. You can't stop God. God will do whatever he wants. He can't be controlled by man. How dare you speak such a thing? Okay, sounds good. But you just don't do the things he told you to do, and tell me how that works out. You don't love your spouse like you've called and said you would. Tell me how that works out. You don't trust God with your finances. You don't take care of your physical health as a temple of God. You don't obey the rules of the land. Pray for the leaders that are put in front of you, whether it be from a church, whether it be from a political standpoint. Like, don't do all the things God says. Okay, let me know how it works out. Because in the book of Proverbs, wisdom scripture, it says, to the one that doesn't follow the book, you won't receive the blessings of God. Doesn't mean that God's way isn't true. No, it just means you didn't choose that way. We talked about a message about a year ago. It was a word called zimzum. Everybody say zimzum. Zimzum. Zimzum is the reality in the Hebrew antiquity where God, enabled to create the world that we understand, he had to subtract a little bit of himself to create a space that we could exist. It's too dense for me to go into today. I'm going to keep it simple, do the best I can. But by God subtracting some of himself, he created a space where we could exist and where we had free will to choose to align with the ways of God or to choose to align with the pettiness of our preferences. So how are you doing with the petty? How are you doing with your preferences? And what I love is in this book, 2 Kings, what it begins to show us is that your preference for your life may actually kill you. Your preference for your financial future, your preference for your family, your preference for your church, your preference for your city, your preference for, put a name on it, could actually kill you. Because when you live life only looking at your preference, you could absolutely miss God's full purpose. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive into the Old Testament, and just a little recap. Anytime we look at Old Testament scripture, I want to remind us, we're looking at Old Testament physical realities for people, but they're spiritual realities for us today. So when you see the wars, you see the context, you see the location, all of that has a deeper level of spiritual understanding for every single one of us today. And what we're doing is we're setting into a time zone where Israel was in the middle of a bad situation. If you look at the history of Israel, it really breaks down to three different areas where it was the start of Israel under Joshua, remember, going into the promised land. Then it was the expansion, the growth under King David, a little bit of Solomon, but then very quickly after that, it was the destruction and disintegration of Israel from foolish decisions, one after another. And where we find ourselves in the story today, unfortunately, is at the latter part of Israel, where Israel now has divided into two nations. You have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was known as Israel. The southern kingdom was known as Judah. And so you have all of the Israel, all of the people that were chosen by God, and they're anointed, they're blessed together, now bickering against one another. They literally were called to be a united force, but instead have different preferences about different things and let it turn into a civil war. So now they're just rocking in disunity, wondering, why doesn't God demand a blessing? And what's interesting is over 150 times in Scripture, it talks about the sacredness of unity. It talks about the beauty of unity, not just in a church, but in your marriage, with your mind, with so many capacities of your life. Because you can help me finish it if you know it. Where there's unity, God demands a blessing. Blessing. Where there's unity, God demands a blessing. That's why in my life, I commit to have unity the best I can. That doesn't mean you always agree with everything, but if you're looking at somebody, let's say 100% to 100%, I imagine there's probably 1% of something we could agree on. And I'm the type of person, I would rather spend 100% on my effort focusing on the 1% than 100% figuring out how I can divide us more and more. Because divided life never becomes a fulfilled life. A divided relationship never becomes a fulfilled relationship. A divided bank account, anybody ever been there before? That is not a blessed bank account. Why? Because where there's disunity, there's no blessing. Friend, I want to encourage you. If you feel there's disunity starting to creep up in your life, be cautious, because I imagine it's Satan himself at your door. Because immediately after disunity comes destruction. Destruction doesn't take place without disunity. You want to see the quickest way for a marriage to be destroyed? Let there be disunity. Quickest way for a nation to go upside down? Let there be disunity. Quickest way for a church to be messed up? Let there be disunity. Quickest way for you to be divided from the purpose God has for you? Let there be disunity. The reason I lean into this is because this is the foundation that led Israel to be exactly where they were. They allowed themselves to be divided, and they didn't even notice the enemy that was creeping up and coming out their back door. So when we set into this location, this is where we're at today. And in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 1 through 3, I'm just going to dive into it so we can get going. It says, now Naaman, this was a general of the army. He was actually the archer that killed King Ahab. He was the previous king of Israel. We're going to talk about a second king in a second. This king is actually his successor. But Naaman is the guy that shot the previous king of Israel. It's very important. He was the commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master. What type of man was he? Great. He was great. And he was highly regarded. He was celebrated. He was incredible because through him, the Lord had given victory. Wait. The Lord blessed the enemy to have victory over the people of Israel? That's interesting. He was a valiant soldier. But, everybody say but, he had leprosy. So if you don't know, leprosy is a disease where bacteria begins to attack your nerves, where you develop an extreme numbness. You can't feel parts of your body. And so I find it very interesting that this man, when we first meet him, and he's an incredible individual. This man is mighty. He is strong. He is prayed. He is adored. He's loved by the king. He's the top general. He's leading the Syrians to do great work. They're keeping Israel bounded. Like, he has all these praises, but he has leprosy. So publicly, he was praised, but privately, he was in pain. Publicly, he was accomplished. He was adored. But in private spaces, he was criticized. Publicly, he was the answer for everything. But privately, he had no answer for what was taking place in his life. It's very easy to read a story like this and begin to think about Naaman and his leprosy situation, but I just want to ask all of us, what's the leprosy in your life? Let me make it a little more clear and come down a little bit more grabbable for all of us. Leprosy, numbness. Where are you experiencing numbness in your life? Are you starting to experience numbness towards your spouse? The one that you loved, that now you can't even handle? You're starting to experience numbness for your kids. You loved them when they were babies, but now they're adults and have opinions. And no, not in my house. How are you doing with your zeal for the Lord? You used to be desperate for God. It didn't matter. God, you can have everything. And then you followed him for 30 years and you're like, all right, you can have most things, but I need a little time. How are you doing with your finances? Just steward them well. I'm not asking are you giving to the church, but how are you doing saving for your 401k retirement? You're like, I've been saving for 40 years. And prices are going up. It's like, how are you doing? How are you doing in life? Pick your category, pick your scenario. But I imagine all of us today, I know I definitely can. I can say, wow, I can say without a doubt, there's some areas of my life I'm feeling some numbness. And most of the time, the numbness that you feel is usually in the area where you're not that strong. Most of the time when people meet me as a pastor or they're going to meet me in any capacity where I'm talking or I'm leading something with my mouth, it's going to go decent, I'd say, with the first time we meet. The reason why is it's my gift. Like, I'm good at this. I've practiced at it. I've put time into it. I've hit my 10,000 hours. I'm not saying I'm the best. I just know the salt of my life. But the reality is I got a whole lot of other areas I'm not that good at. Like, I've got some other areas it's like, that's definitely a weakness. But the problem is whenever you become so good at your craft, you can throw all your time, all your affection into doing what people see for adoration that you forget to spend time on the very things that are causing decay in your life. So instead of embracing the pain of maturity, we just allow ourselves to go numb, thinking, it doesn't affect me. But if you know anything about leprosy, it doesn't just stop at your pinky finger. It moves on to your hand, eventually to your forearm, to your elbow, and pretty soon you begin to feel nothing at all. Friend, can I encourage you? All of us are numb in some area. All of us have leprosy. But can I tell you, if you're willing to expose it to the Lord, He's not going to shame you. He's not going to look at it and go, He's going to say, you're actually ready to talk about that. I'll do something better. I won't just talk about it. I will heal it. Anybody thankful for our God? He doesn't just talk about stuff. He heals stuff. Anybody thankful? He doesn't just look at you and go, okay, I'm glad you vented. He said, no, let's talk about it. Let's work on it. And now you'll go out with skin of a newborn babe. So leprosy was a reality for this man. He was a great man. He was beginning feeling numb, and he was great, but he had leprosy. So in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 2, it says, now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel. Did that girl have a name? Probably. Do we know it in Scripture? No. Young girl from Israel. And she served Naaman's wife. And she said to her mistress, if only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. This no-named girl, we just got to sit here for a second. I need everybody to understand about this. This no-named girl who was a slave, who was taken captive by the enemy, that is serving in the house of the enemy, that is feeding the meals she probably will never have, taken away from her family, her purpose, her preference, all of these things. Literally, she is in captivity, and she hears that her captor is sick and says, if only you knew my master, he would heal you. I read that. I wrote a whole bunch of good points about it, and I was like, man, I'm about to preach the mess out of this. God, thank you. And he's like, no, I don't want you to preach for a second. I want you to look at it for yourself. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, what would you do if you were in that situation? And I was like, what situation? He's like, what would you do if you were captured by the enemy? You were taken from everything that you were known. The most evil thing, the most evil person that has ever done something in your entire life to you, you're literally living in their home, having to serve them, taking care of their wife, taking care of their kids, cleaning their dishes, folding up their nasty drawers and putting them in the laundry. Like, you're doing all that. Would you still invite them to come see me? I was like, God, let's just keep it on the sermon right now. Like, this is for the people. No, I said, okay, God, let's have a conversation. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of things that are easier to preach and teach than they are to live. There's a lot of things that are easier to read in the Bible than they are to live out. There are easier things to give wisdom and counsel about to others that you don't even live in your own home. Well, you know what you need to do with your kids? Just do it with your own kids first. You know what you should do with your bank account? You should set up a Roth IRA, It's like, oh, okay, definitely. Why don't you just answer when the tax people call and pay that bill off? See, I think what's interesting is whenever this woman is approached with a situation, the overflow of her heart was bigger than the reality of her circumstances. Think about this. The person that is broken, that broke her, shows up and she says, I don't want you to be broken anymore. I want you to be healed. She says, I've encountered God in such a way that when this situation shows up, my natural response is to give generous help because of our generous God. We could pack up shop, close the sermon right there, have an altar call. We all going to repent. I'll just say it right there. Because the reality is every day the enemy is trying to make us darker and more selfish. But every day Jesus, our great God, is saying, come into the abundant, loving, generous life that I have for you. Now listen, forgiveness is a reality. I celebrate those of us that have forgiven people that have done horrific things to us. But can I tell you, sometimes you got to forgive them every single decade. Like, I've forgiven people in my life, and it's came back, and I'm like, I'm taking that back, God. And I'm like, oh, no, God, help me to forgive them. God, help me to be gracious. And then God goes, okay, great, you forgave them. Now I'm going to make you have a relationship with them. And it's like, no, God, I wanted to forgive them, let them die, and I see them in heaven. But definitely the die part. No, but God's like, no, I want you to actually have a relationship. Why? Because I don't want you to forgive with your lips, but live with disunity in your heart. See how the sermon connects together? See how I did that for you? Because all of a sudden you go, whoa. I can still walk into the miracle. I can still walk into the blessing. I can still go, welcome to the miracle, but still living with disunity where I can't be blessed. How sad to be in a place where you see the Red Sea divided in front of you, but you can't walk through it because of what's inside of you. It's not because God's not wanting you to go. You just can't go on the journey. But this girl says, out of the abundance of the mouth, the heart speaks. Her natural response is to give an abundance of grace, of love. And here's what I love about this girl. This girl said, I'm not going to play the victim game. I don't know her story, but just that one verse right there, inspired by God, I can understand a lot. She didn't say I'm a victim game. And how many times do we fall into the temptation to play the victim game? Well, I guess I'm never going to get ahead in life. Well, I guess I'm never going to retire. Well, I guess this is never going to work out. I'm never going to get healed. I'm never going to do this. And did you ever notice how victims love to hang out with victims? You get around with victims, they're like, oh, my life's horrible. Yours is too? You're my new best friend. And all we do is sit in our little cry circles talking about how bad life is. But you ever been part of a victim circle? And then one day you show up for your little victim cry fest and you're like, hey, where did Joey go? He used to be here. It was his time to lead the depressing devotion. Where's he at? He's like, well, Joey decided he was going to be a victor. So he went and did something else with his life, and now he's seeing favor. Now he's not in depression anymore. Now he's not in anxiety. Now he's moving on. Why? Because you have to get to a point in your life where you're not defined by what happened to you, but you're defined by what God did for you and what he's doing through you. Notice that. Listen, like I could go on all day getting up here talking about what's been done in my life, horrific things. I would tell you some of them, and you'd be like, I would have never known. But why? I'm not going to waste my time on what the enemy tried to do to me. Like, man, that was a bummer season in life. That hurt getting punched in the face. But you know what? The war isn't over. There's still another round. I'm getting back in, going to knock the enemy on his hind end and go get what God has for me. You've got to get that zeal in your spirit. You've got to get that conviction. I know it's funny, pontifical, simple language, but when you live with that holy grit in your life, can I tell you the gates of hell won't prevail, but you will become a builder of the tower God has for you. The mighty fortress. So this girl said, I'm not going to be a victor. I'm going to live in blessing, and I'm going to be a blessing. And notice when she did, something radical changed. Her name wasn't recorded in history, but her actions were. In today's society, how many names do we record in history but have no actions that are worth ever being remembered? Let's not be the same, church. Let's celebrate the actions and attach a name to it. And it's okay if people don't remember your name, because the fruit in the long run is going to pay off. Man, that's good preaching right there, isn't that? That's so good. Oh, I love y'all. Okay, 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 4. We got to get into this. Naaman went to his master then. So Naaman hears what the girl said and told him what the girl from Israel had said. By all means, go, the king of Aram replied. The king said, go to Israel. Go to our enemy, the one that we've oppressed. Oh, man, let me say this. How crazy that the one that was the oppressor had to go to the oppressed to get the blessing and the miracle. Can I tell you this? Some of you are oppressed right now in a relationship, in a circumstance in life. Could it be that God is using you because your oppressor is about to come for you needing something? What if the prayer you've been praying to be used is about to happen, but it's going to happen for someone you don't want it to happen for? The question is, do you want your prayer answered, or do you want to be the miracle that you've been praying for in the middle? That doesn't rhyme, but you need to sit on that for a while because there's so much there. It can be easy to pray for great things, but when it comes to putting our feet to the faith, can we actually move in the story God has for us? So Israel goes, okay, go send, go talk to him right there. You're going to see what's going to happen. He said, I'll send a letter to the king of Israel. So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. That's a lot right there, okay? Total of $1.3 million. And the letter that he took to the king of Israel read, with this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of leprosy. Now watch this. As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, am I God? can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow, why does the enemy, why does the one that oppressed me send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a fight with me. Notice that when you get the wrong perspective, people that are coming generously, it's people that are coming graciously asking for help, you just see as a problem. He's literally coming and saying, listen, we need some help. Can you please help us? And instead of seeing it, he goes, oh no, he's just trying to pick a fight. He doesn't really mean it. They come and they say, I'm sorry for what I did to you. And you go, no, you're not. No, you're not. I know you're not because I know you. You would never be sorry. Could it be some of us have got the forgiveness extended to us, but we haven't received it because we didn't believe it for ourselves? Could it be the person came and said, I'm sorry, but we held them at an arm's length, that way they could never actually say it? Could it be? Could it be sometimes the very things that we're praying for are happening, but we don't have the faith to actually believe and participate in it? So he gets that and he says, well, he's trying to pick a fight with me, but then watch this. The man of God, Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, and he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. Have the man come to me, some translations say, and know there is still a prophet in Israel. Notice the conviction of the man of God. He hears about a problem, but instead of learning and thinking that it's a bother, he says, no, this is a God miracle that's about to be opened up. Notice the difference in mentality. When you don't understand the authority God has given you, it's Pentecost Sunday, Pastor Chad already talked about it, but the Holy Spirit, it's inside of you, the power of God. When you don't understand the power of God at work in you, you don't understand the assignment that you've been given, you don't understand that salvation, that you are set apart, that you are made for a difference, that you are the head, but you are not the tail. When you don't understand those things, people become problems. They don't become problems that can become solutions. You see people as a problem instead of realizing people are the prize. See, this is the problem with the Western church. The Western church has got so insecure and afraid of the Spirit of God and so turned down in what we want that when people show up with problems, we start to pray that they'll go away. Dear Lord, I pray that you would help the crazy Sally to go away, because I cannot hear about her life one more time. Like, Lord, if you would just let us go back to when it was our nice little bruncheon and we just had our people and we did our things, and if you can bring back my music and my song and my carpet and like all these things, all of a sudden we start getting ready for a country club instead of being Christians that are convicted with a calling. Go into all the world, preach the gospel, bring the kingdom of heaven. And then people come that look like the world and we go, whoa, 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 there's some problems here. Can I say this? I'm thankful that we're part of a church that when we see people with problems, we say, come give me a big hug, sit next to me, you're loved, you're seen, and you're known. That's what I love about our church. And the reason I know it's taking place is because we have people that are serving on Dream Team this week, some seen, some that are unseen, that would be problems in certain contexts, but for us, they've gone on the journey and they are now a blessing. And here's what's crazy. Oh, Lord, help me to share this properly. See, when you live with that selfishness in your spirit, you'll be like, oh, God will never use them, this won't happen. So you'll step out of their life, but you'll still be a part of the community. So one day they'll begin to become a blessing, and you'll start eating the very fruit that they've created for you. And you'll still curse them. Oh, why they never did that? No. And it's like, bro, you eating the apple that they made. You eating the apple that they picked. You love what they're doing, but you don't love them. Why? Because you're not focusing on the community. You're focusing on yourself. You're looking through an isolated lens saying, my preference, what I want, what I desire, what I want to do. And the problem with that, friends, is you decay your soul into such a place where you become numb from what anything God is doing. And instead of going, there's still a prophet in Israel, bring him to me, you say, wow, this person is just trying to pick a fight. They're trying to bring a problem. They're just making things worse. Would they go away? Can I pray for every single one of us that we would just live with the conviction, say it's not by might, it's not by power, but it's by the Spirit of God that is in me. I will be a conduit for miracles and grace to happen in this city. Can we live with that conviction in our souls? Because if we will live with that in unseen spaces, then it can happen in seen spaces. So he said, man of God, bring him to me. Let me see this person. Let's see what begins to happen. And I think this is just such a good reminder Like even today, I'll just share this story real quick. I probably don't have time, but I will. I'm going to a pastor's gathering later this week, and or later today. And every time I go to these pastors' gatherings, I love them. It's very important. There's a lot of incredible people there. But I'll meet someone at some point. They'll be like, hey, where do you pastor? Where are you at? And I'll be like, oh, I'm in Miami. And they'll be like, oh, you're in Miami? That's where Satan goes on vacation. And I'm like, yes! I'll be like, yeah, okay, I've heard that. And we go through the same thing again. They talk about all the drugs, all the dark people. Did you know in the 80s everybody was shooting everybody and all this was happening? Do you know about that? And I just hear over and over all the dark things that the enemy wants to do. But then they'll go, but it's a good thing y'all are there. And I'm like, thank you. That was so encouraging, so encouraging. But can I tell you, I think one of the greatest testimonies of our church is when I talk to people is I get to share the beauty of healthy collaboration, of healthy transition, of two beautiful churches coming together, making something better than they could do by themselves. And then on top of that, I get to say, yeah, but we're choosing to go to the hard spaces. When everyone said, listen, just go to the suburbs, go up into Broward. Like, you're close enough already. Don't be in Miami. Like, you can do a whole lot of different things. And we're saying, no, we're putting our flag in the ground. We're going to come over to Opelika for a little bit, but now we're going back into North Miami Beach, and we ain't leaving, baby. We're going back, and we're taking what the enemy tried to take from us. We're going. I literally drive down the street. I can tell you where. This is going to sound weird, but I can tell you where all the sex shops are at on our street because I've been praying against them. I can tell you where the drug corners are at. I can tell you where the homeless are. I can tell you where the messed up people are. And guess what? I see where they're at, but I also see where we're about to go. Like, we're going. We're going. And how do we go? We go by building a church that is so big, so excellent, so beautiful, yet so welcoming that whoever wants to come in is welcome. And when they come in, we say, oh, great, don't just sit at a service, but now get connected into higher things. Join the dream team. Discover new purpose in your life. Discover new grace. Discover new mercies. Can I tell you, when we live with that conviction, God can do something great. So, yeah, let Satan go on vacation here. Okay. But you know what? He ain't going to come up in North Miami Beach. He can go somewhere else, but why? Because we are taking land. We are buying property. We are making places holy. Do you know every school that we have gone into that there has been something unique that has happened at the school because we've been there? I've talked to both principals at both times. They're like, it's crazy when you guys got here how like a lot of good things began to happen. I was like, that's crazy. A favor. Why? Because when God breathes upon a place for his glory, his pleasure, he does it regardless of who's here. It doesn't matter who's preaching on the stage on Sunday. It doesn't matter who's playing at the keys, who's at the drums. God has chosen to breathe on this church on this time to do something significant. And it's going to happen no matter what. But will you be a part of the journey? I don't know. But if you choose your preferences over his presence, you may not get a go. Because the reality is when we choose our preference over his presence, God will give us our preference, but he won't give us his presence. See, because in the rest of this chapter right here, 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 9, it says, so Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. He goes there, he sees him, and then Elisha sends out his servant, sends out an intern, doesn't even go talk to himself, and he says, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed. But Naaman went away angry. And I said, I thought he would know I was a great man. He would know that he should actually be ruled by me. He should respect me. He should understand. I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord, wave his hands with spirit fingers over the spots and cure my leprosy. By the way, aren't the rivers that are in our land far much better than the rivers of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went off in a rage. 3 things I'm going to give you real quick that's going to stop the presence of God in your life. Number 1, pride prevents presence. Pride prevents presence. Naaman was prideful. He shows up, he says, I am a great man. I'm not just a good man, I am a great man. I came with $1.3 million. I have given you the opportunity to pray for me. I could be the best thing in your ministry. I could be the best thing in your spiritual life. I could be the best miracle. So why don't you come out right now? God, I could be the best thing. If you would just bless what I want to do, bless my church my way, bless my job my way, my marriage my way. If my spouse would understand what I want instead of what they want, if the kids would do what I want to do, if the grandkids would understand that they need to be more like boomers than Gen Z, if Gen Z would just understand how to get their stuff together, if everyone would just do what I want to do, understand I'm great, then a miracle could happen, and it would be awesome. That was pathetic to listen to. How pathetic is it to live that way? So Naaman was prideful. So it stopped him from the presence. Pride will stop you from the presence. Well, don't you know who I am? Yeah, I know who you are. You're a person with borrowed breath and borrowed time. Relax. We're all dust with borrowed breath. Like, let's not forget, we all sit the same at the cross. And it's good to come back to that. I know it's not like popular in today's culture. Like, I need to be picked up. But sometimes you just need to realize you don't need to just be picked up. You need to grow up. Because when you grow up in a maturity of understanding who you are, you understand what grace is. And you realize that God came and gave everything so that we could have life and life to the fullest. It makes grace sweeter, it makes calling more precious, and it makes purpose so much more bountiful when you understand the humbleness God has given you. First thing, pride prevents presence. Second thing right here, posture prevents presence. Posture prevents presence. Let me ask you this. How's the posture of your heart? Listen, Naaman just wanted to show up, put a little bit of money in the bucket for offering, and then wanted his blessing. Pastor, I'm going to show up. I'm going to give you a little bit of my time, my offering. Where's my blessing? I'm out the door. God, I'm going to show up on Sunday. I'm going to do good to follow the good book, but where's my reward? Can I tell you, friends, you can do all the right things, but still have the wrong posture in your heart. You can say all the right things. You can dress the right way. You can talk the right way. You can do it to the T, but in your heart, be completely doing the opposite. Posture prevents presence. And the last one, I've been saying it all morning, preference prevents presence. I don't like those rivers. I don't like those rivers at all. I want the rivers in my country. I like how they feel. I like the water. I like the people that are around there. I want it like that. I want it my way. I already talked how you see this in church, but I think also you see this in people's personal life. I want to steward money my way, God. I want to dress how I want to dress. I want to love how I want to love. I want to allow myself to be the freedom of how I want to be. I want to do what I want to do, and I want you to bless it. And friend, every time you live like that, God's saying, I desire to bless you, my child. I desire to bless you, my son. But the reality is, I cannot pour out a blessing where it won't be stewarded well. And when you're in the depths of sin, you can't be praying for a blessing because you won't receive it. And it's not God's fault. It's actually gracious. Because if he would give you a blessing in the depths of your sin, it would be catastrophic for your life. Third thing, presence over preference. But notice this. When you choose presence over preference, you position yourself for a miracle. Very end of the story. Naaman finally gets over himself because he had a good servant that said, if he would have asked you to do something very simple, you would have done it. But he asked you to do something he said, if he would have asked you to do something really hard, you would have done it because you would have been like, yeah, that's worthy of a journey. But he's like, he asked you to do a simple thing. Like, you can't just do the simple thing. And so he says, okay, you're probably right. He humbles himself, gets in the right posture, says it's not about my preference. And he says, okay, I'm going to put my pride down. He goes down to the river. 2 Kings 5:14. So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him. And as he did, his flesh was restored, and he became clean like that of a young boy. When you choose presence over preference, you position yourself for a miracle. I love how the story wraps up. It's so simple. It's like, hey, he finally got himself together. He did what God said, and God showed up. That's great. But I think the greater part of the story is at the beginning. Because while it's a simple line that reads about a miracle, right before that, there was a simple journey that really wasn't that simple because Naaman had to let some stuff down. In this series, we've been talking about Welcome to the Miracle, and I'm believing in faith there's going to be miracles all across this house in the months to come. We're already seeing some that are happening right now. It's incredible. But friend, I think there's some of us in here today that to get to that next journey of what God has for us, it's time for some of us to let our pride down. And pride isn't always that you're the biggest airhead in the room. We kind of think, oh, I'm not prideful because I don't talk about myself. I'm not like that. But you can still be prideful in your heart and no one else know it. And this is where the Holy Spirit is great because he'll talk about it more specifically than I ever could. He'll be like, I don't have any pride. And then you'll feel that feeling. You're like, oh, I don't think that's pride. If you're still feeling the oh feeling, that's God probably talking to you saying it's pride. Some of us need to let pride down. Some of us need to develop a greater posture for the Lord. We need to become desperate for what he has. And a posture, yes, is within your heart, but also with your physical time. Some of us need to dive into the good book and give it a read. Some of us need to create some Sabbath in our life so we have time to be with other believers and to relax in the presence of God. Some of us need to begin to worship to a new degree, realize it's a weapon, realize that it is one of the main ways God makes miracles happen in our life. And then for some of us, we need to lay down our preferences and start choosing His presence. And let me tell you, when you begin to do that, miracles truly do begin to happen. Like I think about my life, just a couple more minutes. I think about my journey here as we went on this journey of starting this church all together. This was never what I thought was going to happen. It's never my preference. Not what I thought. But then I got to a point in my life where I was just like, you know what? I'm realizing my preference is not that good. It's 2020. I have no idea what's happening in the world. I'm just going to trust you, God. And like, when the door's open, we're going to go through. Boom. And it became better. I think when I first married Jacqueline, I love my wife like crazy, always have. But I remember when we first got married, things that happened and like how stuff was working out. And I was like, I don't think this is my preference right now. But I was like, you know what? I'm more committed to this girl than my preference. So like, let's go on the journey. God, I want your presence in it. I think about like in the season I'm in with kids and like some of my scheduling and stuff that's happening and stuff I'm having to give grace in areas. I'm like, it's really in my preference, but I crave the presence of God more than my preference. Like I'm thinking about it. Think about how I'm losing hair right now. That's definitely not my preference. But I'm sure God blesses bald people, right? Because all men end up old and bald. That's not spiritual at all. That's just dumb, Chancellor. The reason, though, I say that is because I want to invite you to let your preference down. If you'll just let go of your preference, you can be consumed by the presence of God. And listen, it's hard. It's hard. Like, there's things that happen. Like, I've been thinking about my relationship with Chad. Talked about it last week, too. But there's things that Chad does I don't like. I don't like some of the things you do. And I've told him. And there's stuff I've done he doesn't like. But it's not my preference of how he would spend his time or what he would do. But you know what? I love him. I love hanging out with him and being with him. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give up my preference and I'm going to be in your presence. And there's sometimes what I'll do is I will do things he would want to do. I wouldn't want to do with my free time, but I will do it because I want to be in his presence. Can I tell you, that's how some of us need to begin to operate with the Lord. You need to realize, hey, I have some things that aren't my preference, but I want to lean into it, God, because I want to lay it down so I can have your presence. There's some things, God, I'd like to do right now on the weekend. I definitely don't want to go to church. I'd rather go to the beach. It's too hot. I don't want to put on high heels and have to walk up them stairs. I don't want to have to get all together with the kids. I don't want to do that. I don't want to wake up early to read my Bible. Listen, my friend, if you would lay down your preference and you would crave his presence, everything would change. And you would no longer have to pray for certain miracles. You would just walk in one day and go, oh, this is the miracle. You ever stumbled into a miracle? It's pretty amazing. But the reason you stumble into a miracle is because God says, I knew what you wanted from the beginning, but you didn't. So now because you gave up your preference, I can mature you into what your heart really desires. So may we be a people that gives up our preference. And may we crave his presence. And may we be a people that are committed to that individually, but also communally. And as we do that, may we enter with wonder and awe at what God's going to do in the new season.